We are so excited to announce that we have created a brand new Sacred Shift Besties meditation and journaling starter kit, and we're giving it to you absolutely free.
It includes a guided meditation for inner peace created by yours truly,
as well as a beautiful printable journal loaded with prompts to spark self-reflection and gratitude. And you can download it right now by clicking the link in the show notes.
Enjoy!
Hi, I'm Melissa. I'm an intuitive coach and mentor.
And I'm Louisa. I'm an awakening coach and energy healer.
And we're your spiritual besties.
We're just everyday women having an extraordinary human experience.
You see, we've both been led down the path of amazing discoveries through the power of spirituality.
So, we're here to share our experiences as we dive deep into all things sacred.
Our hope is that we can contribute to the collective conversation to help you feel less alone and more confident as you walk the path to becoming more connected with the universe.
We'd love for you to join us each week as we share our discoveries and navigate this journey together.
So I was going to say that I feel like that's one of the things that I get caught up on sometimes when I'm thinking about living my life in an intentional way that is the way that I want to live it, and making decisions based on how I feel best and how I feel like I should move through this life. And I think that it's this constant balancing act when you have kids, and sometimes there has to be some compromise there, right? And it's always this challenge of when you don't want to be compromising 24/7, because then you're not truly living authentically, right? And at the same time, you need to be there for your kids, and you need to, I don't necessarily think sacrifice is the right word, but you need to make some compromises along the way because you need to do what's best for your kid in certain situations. And so it's this balancing act, right? Like it's this back and forth, and you have to navigate that when you are on this path of tuning into yourself and understanding yourself, knowing yourself, making aligned decisions along the way. And at the same time, you have a family to take care of. And I think it's this unique situation that we deal
I
with.
do. I agree with you so much. And it's funny, I was actually thinking about that yesterday. There was a situation that came up. It didn't start out related to this, but it ultimately did lead me back to exactly this balancing act about living my own truth and making decisions intentional. But also, I'm a parent. And even though I agree with that, I don't think we necessarily need to make sacrifices for our kids, but we do need to find that balance where it's what's best for them and what's best for us. And do I just wait another year, for example, for my son to graduate high school versus relocating because I want to live near the water? And it's a balancing act. And the conclusion that I came to was that it is a balancing act. Is the sacrifice that I'm going to make right now something that's going to make me feel resentment towards myself and them? It is hard when you're a parent because it is our responsibility to do what is best for them. And I think for so many years myself, I just hyper focused on that.
Mhm.
And I let myself go, telling myself that every decision that I made was like, it just needs to be the best for them. That was it. There was no thought of me in any of it. First, I want to share that I don't think this is something I'm always centered on. I think it goes up and down just like everything else in life. But I think that I have found that balance where I can ask myself a few questions to get to the decision. Am I going to make the sacrifice? Whether it's tiny or whether it's big. For me, it feels pretty big right now because when I relocate, I want to live somewhere near the water, and I live in the center of Texas. There's no, and
Not near water.
yeah, no, not near water. So yeah, I totally agree. It's a very delicate balance, I think.
It is. And I think that the reason that it is challenging is because I think as moms, we naturally just want to do what's best for our kids, or what we think is best for our kids in every single situation. That's just our natural tendency, is to put them first.
Mhm.
I said what we think is best for our kids because I think a lot of times even those decisions that we're making can be somewhat misguided, because it's my kid obviously needs X, Y, and Z, but it's like, do they really? Or is that just what society has told us that they need to be doing? I think for us, a lot of it is like all the sports and the activities with having 4 kids. Like, we know so many of our friends who they have multiple children in multiple activities at a time, and these families are just running from place to place. Every single evening, the moms, at least, because those are the ones that I've talked to the most, the moms are exhausted. They're just like, I can't do this. And so I think for us, we're like, yeah, we want to allow our kids to have those experiences and do those activities, but we've drawn this line of each kid can have one activity going on at a time, because
Yeah,
that alone is 4 different things to
yeah,
do every single week, which is a lot as a family of 6 to coordinate and deal with, but it's okay. We want them to have that experience, and that is that. And at the same time, like, we need to think about our own sanity in all of this and our own capacity, because ultimately, at the end of the day, if we're running around constantly stressed out, crazy, that's not what's best for our kids either.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's like finding that balance, but I think it is hard because I think naturally, especially in today's society, we tend to just put the kids, what we feel are their needs, mostly desires,
Mhm.
above our own. And so it is hard because you have to pull that back and rein that in a little bit sometimes.
Yeah, that's such a good point because in retrospect, of course, I think that was a big impact on my marriage, which is another point that I think we miss a lot when we talk about the societal expectations and like all these kids and these activities. My kids have, for the most part, only done one activity at a time, but it's been really intense. Like
Mhm.
it's one activity, but it's 6 nights a week. And when you have two parents in a household, which most households do have today, are two working parents,
Mhm.
and you think about those are the things that you have to show up for the 5, 6 times a week. Everything that goes on behind it, all the emails, the signups, the registration, the t-shirts, the donations, the banquets, the this, the that, and it's a lot. And it's a lot with one kid because we have been lucky enough, our kids have, there's an 8.5 year age difference where the intensity has not been continuously the same with both kids at the same time. But if it had been, I don't see how, just from that one perspective, just that one point, I don't see how my marriage would have survived that, just that alone. So I think that you're right when you say that it doesn't serve them when we engage them in all of these activities. And I can say also these really rigorous activities that are like 5, 6 times a week. I am so against those now. I am completely against those. When I look back and I think about the impact that it had on my own relationship, what was the impact? Who did it hurt? Was it good or was it worse? I don't know. They have divorced parents. So, like, you tell me, and I guess it's up for everyone to interpret themselves. But for my own interpretation, is if we didn't spend 5, 6 weekends in a row not together, would that have had a positive impact on my relationship? Probably. So, I really think there has to be a balance. I love that you have laid that out. And you're right, where it's like, if we're running around with our heads cut off and we don't even have time to gather ourselves because we're now working full time, managing all of the invisible tasks, which I heard on a podcast like so many years ago, and it resonated so much with me. All the invisible work that happens, right? All the emails, registrations that you don't see because it's someone sitting on a computer or on their phone doing one of the parents, but it has to be done because then you get nasty grams from the organizers, and then you're this horrible parent who's not responding to emails from the team or whatever. I was telling a friend recently actually how I sat at one of my son's baseball games that I drew boundaries, and so I didn't go to all of them, but one of the ones that I did go to, I was watching this couple, and I know they both work full time. And this was the first time in the day since they left the house that morning that they had seen each other again. And that's when it really hit me. That's when I started to think about the impact that had on my own relationship. And they were just like two strangers. They didn't talk. And they just sat there like numb, so numb. And you're in a public place. You have basically had no time to de-stress from work because you're running from work there. Most of the time, I remember having to leave work early to make these games and stuff when I did go. I think it's too much. I think we need to reassess all these activities and all these things that we put our kids in because, in my experience, it honestly doesn't even serve them.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think at the end of the day, like they're gonna be much better equipped to handle the life ahead of them if they've got parents who are able to have a little downtime,
Yeah.
be able to de-stress, be able to regulate. And the way we do that is through space, having that space in our lives to focus on regulating ourselves. But that's interesting that you mentioned like the invisible workload because we have 4 kids, they have 4 different teachers. And so this school year was the first year where all 4 kids were in school all year, 4 different teachers, 4 different weekly emails, plus they're at 2 schools, so 2 different principals' emails every week too. And I was like, how am I going to keep up on all of
Yeah.
these emails every year? This is how it's going to
Yeah.
be every
It's
single year.
crazy. Yeah.
And I totally did. I missed it. I missed, which I mean, this is crazy in itself for our daughters who are at the elementary school. Their field day is next Wednesday because the last day of school is next Friday. So they're having their field day where they're like outside playing on a bunch of bouncy houses all day, basically.
Oh
And they
my
have
God.
parent volunteers there because all the kids are outside. They need tons of people watching. And I'm like, oh, I want to volunteer for this. And so I finally, like on Monday of this week, I emailed the principal because I had decided a couple weeks ago I wanted to do this. And I'd been like looking for an email that said, hey, sign up here to volunteer. So I emailed the principal on Monday and oh, I sent that email out in early April and it filled up immediately. And I added 20 spots and filled that up immediately. And I'm like, I missed that. Like I totally just
Yeah.
missed that.
Yeah.
And also, how crazy is it that you had to volunteer back in early April for something that's happening at the end of May? And they filled up like that. And she's like, sorry, no more spots available. And I was just like,
Yeah.
this is nuts. Like, this is all so
Yeah.
crazy to me. And so it's just so many different things. But yeah, I totally missed that. And I'm like, I have to be okay with that. Sorry, I missed it. It wasn't intentional, but with 10 emails coming through every single week, I'm gonna
Oh
miss
my
things.
gosh. I have the one email because my son, he's the junior. He's on top of his
Yeah.
stuff 99.99% of the time.
Hmm.
I have the one email a week from my one daughter from her one teacher. We don't get a principal email and I can barely keep up. So you're a trooper. I've missed so many things and I'm glad you mentioned that I had to learn to be okay with that because at first I would be like, oh my God, I literally have one kid to keep up with and one email. And with regards to like the invisible work, like, yeah, that's that one email for that. But all the other stuff that she comes up with the Scholastic Book Fair, she wants to match outfits with her friends. So I need to make sure that this is washed and this is prepared and these shoes are,
Hmm.
cleaned and prepped and whatever. My daughter reads a lot. She reads a lot. So it's like also for me, that's another thing. And like keeping up with that. Did I order her next book? Is it coming? Where can I find it? Keeping up just with everything else in life, right? Where it's one kid, one email, and it was so hard with all of the other invisible work that happens that
Hmm.
I couldn't even, you're a tuber. There's a lot. There's a
I
lot.
definitely miss a lot of things and mostly just like skim through the emails to see if there's anything
Yeah.
that's like important. You need to know this. And then that's it. And then it's okay. Check that off.
Check
Did
that
it
off,
for the
move
day.
on. Yeah. Yeah, and her teacher's really good where I did love that it was her first year in the school system, but I did appreciate so much that she kept putting the same reminders at
Mhm.
the bottom, which honestly, halfway through the year, I was like, really? There's people who still don't get it. I'm like, there's people who don't get it. And then literally, I remember reading it one day again, and I was like, oh shoot, I've been forgetting that for the last couple of weeks. So I was like so grateful that she like had
Kept
this
putting it on
blip
there.
in there. Yeah, these
Mhm.
reminders. And like what's coming up next? She had that in every email. which just
Mhm.
helped me put it in my calendar,
Mhm.
a reminder for when the time came. But even those things, like when do I have to send cupcakes? When do I come in? When do I? Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot. Oh my gosh, it's so much.
It
So
really
much.
is. And I
Yeah.
think too, like you just mentioned the when do I have to send cupcakes? So for our kids' schools, when it's their birthday, they're not allowed to take in food, but they can take in like little gifts, so gift bags for the other kids. And I don't do that. I was going to one year and then I started trying to do that and I'm like, I can't. Like I would have to do this for 4 kids every single year and that's so much. I'm not going to be that parent who does it. But every like probably every couple months a kid will come home and it was someone else's birthday in their class and they'll come home with a little bag full of all these like toys and like random stuff and like oh so and so's birthday and they handed these out and I'm like it can be so easy to get caught up in that and to think you don't want your kid to not do that, right? I think it can be so hard because you're like I don't want my kid to not be able to do that when they see these other kids doing it. But it's just, yeah, it's not realistic for me to think that I could possibly do that for 4 kids every single year. It was enough when in the preschool they have to take in snack. And so it's always been this way. When it's the kid's birthday, then it's like their day to take in snack. And so with twins in preschool having the same birthday, they both had to take in snack on their birthday. So they got to
Yeah.
get snack for both these kids to take into their class for the day. That was enough.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? I'm so glad that you mentioned that because it brought to mind two things. One is I am the mom that sends that bag. Like I put a lot of effort into the bag. This year they looked like Tiffany bags. That was the color that we picked. Literally, like I love doing that. But I'm also the mom who like I don't volunteer for field trips. I don't just to put things into perspective, I love that you mentioned it's crazy to think that we're gonna do all of the things because if the mom doesn't realize and falls into that societal pressure, when she gets my kid's bag that day, she may be like, oh my God. And I totally understand that, but I don't do like 90% of anything else. So I think it is important for us to draw boundaries and draw lines and understand that we cannot do all of the things and perhaps choose the things that do matter. You volunteer, we're going to volunteer for field day. And you know what matters to you and to your kid most and show up for that versus thinking that we need to show up for everything. Because honestly, we don't. There's at least 20 parents in a classroom. If we all just do that, there will be at least a couple parents at every event, and that is fine. That's all that they need. And another point is when you mentioned twins and sending in snacks, something else that we often don't talk about is we don't have to think about the monetary aspects of that. We're very blessed that way. But think about someone in financial distress having to do that.
Mhm.
Like when I think about my daughter's bag and I put it together, and I'm like, if I had to do this for 2 kids, it would be shut down. Like it's done. We're not doing it. But it's one kid, one bag, one time a year. And so thankfully I don't have to think about that. The demand of these societal pressures of putting our kids in all of these things,
Mhm.
it's unrealistic. Like, how do you do that? That can create a very quick issue in a family dynamic.
Mhm. And that is what having 4 kids, we really can't do something like that for 1 or 2 kids and then not the other ones. That's always a consideration is okay, if we do this for 1 kid, to do
Yeah,
it for all 4 kids. And while I don't believe that everything needs to be quote unquote fair, I think that different people are going to have like different interests and different things that they want to do. And that's totally fine. But I do feel like if we did something like that for 1 kid, we have to do it for all 4 kids.
yeah,
And then the other thing that I just thought of when you said this with the activities, yeah, for us, not only is it just the time, right? That's the main contributing factor, but
right.
cost is also a factor. If you have
Absolutely.
4 kids in 4 different activities, these activities are like 100 or more dollars a month. That's a lot of
Yeah,
money. And they go on for several months at a time. Yeah, there's so many different factors. And I think a lot of times parents overextend themselves, whether it be financially or just mentally, physically. due to what they think they should be doing for their
Yeah.
kids.
I think the change happens when we individually, the position where I took this year, that it's, I'm not participating in that. I think that's BS. I think it's total BS
Mhm.
and very PC about it for my child's sake, because I don't want it to negatively impact them. And we're at a place in society where we're still the minority, the ones that are aware and who understand. We can step back and actually look at the impact that these little things actually have on our lives and our families and our kids and our health. Because we're still the minority, I don't go out and say it, but I already have a plan for when my son graduates next year. I'm just going to blurt it out and tell these people that they are doing a disservice to the children and they're doing a disservice to the family structure, is what it really is. I feel so strongly about it
Mhm.
because I remember my son getting home this year, the nights that he didn't have an activity, and they would do these team dinners where different families were supposed to host. And thankfully, most of us don't have to worry about the financial component of it, which is a huge thing when you're feeding 13, 15, 20 teenage boys,
Yeah.
okay? But aside from that, is he just wanted to be. The 2 days that he got off a week, the 2 evenings, he just wanted to lay on his couch or whatever. And he didn't get to do that. So it's, who is it really serving? Who are the dinners for? Because it's not for the kids. These kids just want to rest. They're exhausted. And so I think that the change needs to occur on a basis of each and every single one of us taking a stand in our own family, because that's where it starts, right? Like what you've done, where you're like, okay, each kid gets one activity at a time. That's
Mhm.
our line. And for me, it's, I'm willing to devote 2 evenings a week to each kid's activity. And that's my line. And I think we really do need to start drawing those boundaries so that we can make the change, because I think the negative impact is much greater than the positive impact
Mhm.
long term.
Yeah, and I think that is, we've talked a lot about being the change, like showing people what's possible as far as like the spirituality and the living authentically and all of that kind of stuff. We've talked a lot about that. But I think that this is another side of that too, of just showing people it's okay and being strong in that stance and letting people know, yeah, this is our thing and doing it unapologetically. I don't show up for every single thing. I get invites for kids stuff like all the time. And sometimes I just say, we're not going to be able to make it.
Yeah, that's
That's it.
that's it.
And I think just being that, and while sometimes you can feel judged
Oh,
while
yeah.
you're in the moment doing that, right? But I think at the same time, a lot of people, if they really thought about it, it's like they may almost be envious of those boundaries. I think probably a lot of people are envious of those boundaries, but just showing people that it's possible and that we can do that.
Yeah, and I love that you brought that up, because what I think it does is it contributes to the idea of living our authenticity, right? Because sometimes when we're talking about these things, I think it can be like, it can seem abstract, like living your truth. What does that mean? That's what that means, is taking a stance, showing other people by doing it and doing it unapologetically and not allowing others' feelings and opinions affect you, because you're ultimately doing it for yourself and for your family's sake. Because here's an idea that my spiritual coach introduced me to. She's like, you need to take something and you need to embrace the idea of contract and expand. And the expansion is, you have an idea. This is me who has the idea. I'm standing here. And then you have to expand, let it out into the universe. Like the idea doesn't need to manifest in this moment. You just had it. You need to let it become what it needs to become. And how do you do that? You let that go.
Mhm.
Then when it comes back to you, it comes back much better placed. It's picked up what it's needed to pick up, whatever energy, and it's let go of whatever energy needs to be let go of.
Mhm.
And I think that's something that we do just by sharing our lives on this podcast. Here's the idea. Here's the idea And here is an understanding that it's okay, that it has probably crossed your mind. And you have thought about the fact that everybody else is going to judge you. But think about what matters most. Is everybody's judgment at the end of the day going to matter when you no longer have a relationship with your partner and you're now getting a divorce? What's the impact of that on your children? Because you all were in 20 different directions all of the time and didn't have time to build a relationship. What's the impact on your kids when they don't know how to sit by themselves and feel their feelings?
Mhm.
What's the impact on your kids when like they don't know who they are because they haven't had enough time to slow down and think about it?
Mm.
We don't think about those things on a day-to-day basis. We just think we have to go. We're supposed to be here. We signed up for this. And so is our family friend, and they've been to all of our activities, and we need to be there. And oh my God, what are they going to think if we don't sign them up for this extra part of the activity? And oh my God, are they going to think that we're broke if we don't sign them up for the elite experience of this activity? And the answer is it doesn't matter what anybody thinks. What do you think? And what's the impact on your own family?
Mhm.
So we just are asking you to let the idea expand, let it expand, and then make a decision for yourself and for your family because that'll sit with you, I think, for a lot longer than that moment. That's a wrap for this episode.
We hope you found some inspiration, a helpful tip, or maybe just a good laugh.
Remember, amazing human, you are not alone on this path to connect with your inner wisdom and the universe.
To stay connected and keep the conversation going, subscribe to our YouTube channel and our podcast so you never miss an episode.
And if this episode resonated with you, share it with your friends, family, or anyone who might find value in it. Until next time.